The objective today was to have focused meetings. So all the meetings today were supposed to be focused, invitation-only meeting, pockets of them, to look at subjects we've highlighted, and I'm very fulfilled that we're able to properly deal with all those issues, and not just properly deal with them, also have a robust engagement, in which case we have the audience contributing very positively to the conversation and more diverse views and all of that.
How can we make sure that people know what is false news? How do I spot it? How do I make sure that you're not part of the problem, but you're part of the solution? We have some ideas, but we want to most of all hear from people who are expert in the field, and also from yourself. What can we do better? We have some ideas, but we want to really hear from you to figure out how we can tackle this idea of false news, false information, misinformation, to make sure that it will not negatively affect Nigeria in general, but especially now that we are entering election season.
Dubawa is an independent verification and fact-checking platform that serves to distill or sort of replace misinformation with information. So with the rise of social media, we cannot exactly stop what people share, but what we can do is to try to replace wrong information with the right information. And if it comes from a credible organization, people would be more susceptible to believing that.
A few years ago, so that's about 3 years ago, in 2015, there was a pet project on fact-checking. It was partisan, but it worked in the sense that it took what was false information, got a group of 4 volunteers, not a lot, to research and ask questions. Okay, so this is being said about this presidential candidate. Is it true? We checked the records and realized that some of the things he was being accused for, the people who said them had apologized after they had been sued to court. But these stories continue.
We are going to be talking about what are exactly are the digital rights that are relevant to our context in Nigeria, what are the issues there, and then what are the violations that are going on, what are the laws that are being made, whether positive laws on digital rights on digital rights, or negative laws on this.
Tomorrow is going to be packed full of activities because this conversation will be happening simultaneously in 2 places. We have the banquet hall here and we have the basement hall holding simultaneous sessions tomorrow.
Welcome to the Internet Freedom Forum 2018. Welcome from those who have traveled from far and wide to be part of this conversation. I hope that you are as excited as I am, and my team is as well, to receive all of you.
We have the opening panel this morning. I want to quickly invite, the panelists who will set the tone. The conversation this morning for the next 80 minutes is to set a tone for the conversation. We'll be looking at what is happening across the continent and what happened over the past year or so.
As an organization, we have to manage our resources well, and what we decided this year as a team to focus on were internet shutdowns, specifically in conflict environments, as well as internet shutdowns that have been used across the Arab region, like during exam time. So it's not maybe the most sort of sexy look at internet shutdowns, unfortunately, but I think it's what's happening, and we see it as this idea of using the internet as a single point of control, and it's actually highlighting that there's actually a policy problem. And we're starting to sort of make those connections over and over again, that the internet is being used as a scapegoat for policy problems that haven't been dealt with at a deeper level.
There's a favorite phrase I came across once I joined Google. and it's this. If you break the user's trust, it's completely bad for business.
The pity, which I think also Melako mentioned, is that the African Union, the UN Economic Commission for Africa, as my addition, they are based in Addis Ababa, and when there's a shutdown in Addis Ababa, they are affected. They actually don't have alternative means of access to the internet. They could do more, and as civil society, as business, we can make them see what more they could do.
So what would I like us to do in the next few days? To find time in the midst of the conversations around cybersecurity, privacy, to actually look to the African Union, to our African continent, to review what it says about rights. And let's see if it actually measures up to what we advocated for. Because at the end of the day, sincerely, you can tack onto the track of the conversations everywhere else globally. But if our laws and our legislations, the things that the governments that are critical to ensuring this world works well, if what they're agreeing to does not sync with our conversation around digital rights and freedom, then sincerely, we are just making noise in a really large room.
Demand algorithm accountability. Well, we want foundation. I think you can see later they did a report on that. So we need data storytellers.
Today, the internet is very significant to the economy of Nigeria, and not just Nigeria, indeed the world. When we look at what youth, what urban citizens are using, the advantage they have in terms of their access to internet, when we compare it to what is happening in the rural area, we realize that there is still a huge gap. So this session is...
So we're going to make this very interactive sort of conversation and exchange between the four of you before we open it up to the floor. And I think because we're talking about freedom, freedom of the internet, it would be interesting to hear from you, beginning with you, Aisha, what freedom is, or can invade freedom of the internet?
For me, freedom is freedom of expression, freedom of speech, which is included in the freedom of press also. The Tunisian constitution stipulates in its articles 31 and 32, I quote. So Article 31 guarantees freedoms of opinion, thought, expression, information, and publication. And these rights may not be subject to prior control also over by the state. There's also Article 32, which is really very famous in Tunisia and the whole region, which is Article 32, which guarantees access to information. I quote, enshrines the right to access to information and communication networks.
When you talk about freedom, all citizens in the region or in a particular country, they are entitled to the same space. Like Aisha said, of course, freedom of expression is a little wide. It includes freedom of opinion, freedom of the media, freedom of the press, which is of course print, electronic, and online.
The state of affairs is quite worrying. We definitely need to fight back. I mean, there is no other word. Like I was saying yesterday, when rights are infringed to that extent, it's important to fight back. And yes, what we are looking to do now is continue to foster collaborations, ask, well, for everyone's support. Like in Cameroon, the support from the community was so important. I mean, we felt that we were not alone in the struggle, and I think that's part of how we managed to some extent overcome the censorship that we have been living. But yes, there needs, well, the region does need solidarity from other places in the continent.
Well, this is the last session of the day, and it's going to be it's called Stop Press, Media and Government Overreach in the Digital Age. And we're going to be talking about some of the pressing issues that, a lot of or a lot of governments and a lot of people on social media in this continent have been discussing and have been talking about in recent days, months and years.
There has to be a way to sanction media houses without having to pull the plug on the internet or shutting down the media houses or anything. But there have to be ways, and I guess the legal system is one way, but there has to be a price that the media pays for disinformation, for fake news and all that. So I think that's my view. Government should not hold the knife and the yam, but the media also should not see that as an excuse or an opportunity to act without responsibility.
I will say that the institutions of the media, both at the level of association, like the unions, the guilds, the editors, they have truly not organized in the right moment, right frame of mind to give the necessary pushback. So the way then to see it by way of a conclusion is that if we place this whole relationship within a human rights framework, I will say that pretty much things have changed, but not very much.
The major casualty from hate speech is probable violence and then violation of human rights. Once there's violence resulting from hate speech,
the goal of this conversation, which I believe that would not be between me and just the panelists, but you also would voice your opinions, is to increase knowledge around the challenges that we face in Africa for wide-scale inclusion and what should be those policy interventions that we should begin to give attention to around increasing digital inclusion in Africa or bridging the divide, which is, generally the gapping access and use of ICTs. And again, to also begin to look at the collaborations that are important in order to scale these hurdles and see that we have digital solutions that address our context and solve the problems around the divide that we face.
So when we start to think about digital inclusion, we must first find out, are there any other rights that we can hold on to? Are there any other rights that become the pacemaker? Okay, this is how we achieve this, therefore, this is a route to
At the end of the panel, the objective is for us to come up with ideas on how to keeping in mind the different countries that keeping in mind that the realities are different in each countries. At the end of the day, we want to come out with ideas on how to empower activists and people who just communicate online and voice their disagreement with whatever government is doing in an era where African governments are becoming more and more able to listen in on communications and hack email addresses and all of that.
This panel is looking at how to ruin elections in Africa. And typically we talk about how to win elections. When I first saw the title, I was like, wait, did someone make an error? But obviously there is no error. Because elections in Africa can be complex. Some would even like to say they can be special. So 20 countries are facing elections in 2018. A few of them have had those elections already. Egypt has had elections, Liberia has had elections. And elections in Africa end up mostly being plagued with electoral violence, allegations of voter fraud and things like that. Now, many believe that buying, rigging, or stealing is the name of the game when it comes to elections on the African continent. With digital rights being violated, fake news, and much more happening with crucial elections happening on the continent, let's talk about what happens next and what happens beyond some of these elections.
So when it comes to elections, in Togo they are ruled through the control of the judiciary, the hijacking of the electoral body, and most importantly through military repression. And this is happening every 5 years that we have elections, to a point where people don't have any trust in the electoral process anymore. And they feel like as long as we have this family in charge and in control of all the institutions, we cannot have credible and transparent elections.
Democracy is not just about the election day. It's about basically your citizenship, your contract with your government throughout the entire period of your life.
And I want to, of course, very quickly say thank you to our partners who make this possible. One of the things that we love to do when we have these conversations is to get everyone who needs to be here, here as much as possible. If you could just do me the favor of putting your hands together for Ford Foundation, I would really appreciate that. Can you please put your hands together for Google, Facebook, Microsoft, The Guardian, not The Guardian UK, The Guardian Nigeria, and Premium Times.